So I guess I'd become what they wanted me to be. A killer. Some rent-a-clown with a gun who puts holes in other bad guys. Well, that's what they had paid for, so in the end, that's what they got. Say what you want about Americans, but we understand capitalism. You buy yourself a product and you get what you pay for. And these chumps had paid for some angry gringo without the sensibilities to know right from wrong. Here I was, about to execute this poor bastard like some dime store angel of death. And I realized they were correct. I wouldn't know right from wrong if one of them was helping the poor and the other was banging my sister.
I loved the Max Payne franchise. It was a collection among some of my childhood favorites, and it was at a time where I never really played a lot of shooters back then, but mostly racing games. My love for the Matrix though at the time had exacerbated my enjoyment over the first Max Payne when I first played it. It was a dark and gritty shooter with some really solid gunplay and slow-mo mechanics, and was actually quite challenging even then. A good shot from the shotty would kill you, or a well-timed explosive. Revisiting again over the years only made me enjoy it even more, all the while appreciating what it set out to do. The franchise was Remedy's baby, before Rockstar came aboard and were given the reins, so that Remedy could move on to other IPs like Alan Wake, Quantum Break, and Control. Max Payne was a combination of noir crime storytelling and John Woo action. The narration would be the noir-centric hardball detective who would put guns into action instead of words, diving and abusing slow-mo to get the advantage against overwhelming odds. There was almost nothing like it at the time, and while there was some, they didn't hold a candle to Max Payne 1 or 2, which felt refined, had a well-written character with great storytelling, and some insane mods to make it even better than it already was. Around this time too, Rockstar were already cooking with the GTA franchise, with San Andreas being the best GTA title still in my opinion, Bully, one of the most unique open world games ever made, Manhunt 1 and 2, another great franchise, GTA 4, and then Red Dead Redemption. Those two games would be Rockstar's transition into the HD era of gaming, rebooting their old worlds with reincarnated settings, characters, and a number of quality improvements from the available tech. Eventually though, Rockstar would come out with one last linear ride. It would make one of the greatest third-person shooters of all time, and easily one of their top 5 games in my opinion. Max Payne 3. Max Payne 3 is a game that is on the one hand a masterpiece and also a polarizing title. When we first saw the early concept art for the game, it was the complete opposite of what we would expect in a sequel to Max Payne 2. Part of what made the Max Payne titles great was the setting it told its story in. New York was the perfect noir city, coupled with the action and the violence that would routinely pop up, fighting mobsters, corrupt organizations, or people in cleaning suits with military-grade weapons. 3, however, took us not only out of New York, but out of America, going down south into Brazil of all places. The backdrop had changed entirely, and some aren't too fond of the change. Contextually though, it does make sense. Part of Max's descent into addiction is also the untalked addiction to violence. When everything else in his life has fallen apart, the fighting is when he can just let go of everything for a moment, and forget how many painkillers, or sips, or should I say bottles of whiskey he's emptied. Brazil is one of the most violent countries in the world, a place where death squads regularly conduct raids and a shootout is guaranteed to happen. And you could be watching TV in your home and a bullet pierces through your wall, and the worst happens. It's the world that Max ends up in. A place where he doesn't speak the language and where they don't water their drinks. Brazil itself was a surprising change, but the violence and the action itself hasn't changed at all. If anything, it's only intensified given the volatile nature of the place that Max finds himself in. It's a new chapter for Max, but it's one that starts at the very bottom. Throughout the 2 games, Max tries to come to terms with the people he's lost, but it seems that time hasn't exactly been nice to him. We have now an older Max, still in the same cycle of self-suicide, downing painkillers and alcohol on a graveyard diet. The memories from the past haunt him still, and even with the people that were responsible for the loss of his family and the loss of Mona are long gone, the pain itself is still there, and somehow Max is still going, even if it's through an endless cycle of self-destruction. The story is that he ends up in Brazil, working as a personal bodyguard for the Branco family, a family of rich people within the country with a lot of mouths to feed and a lot of hands to shake. You and another guard, Passos, are on duty while everyone else is partying. Of course though, since it's Max and that trouble seems to find him, trouble seems to come knocking in the guise of balaclava wearing thugs, speaking Portuguese and holding cheap pistols. From there on, we see the Max we know materialize in some of the most satisfying third-person combat I've ever experienced.
I'd said I would protect the girl. I hoped I hadn't lost my edge, along with everything else. I figured it was time to start doing mine. Let's go.
I should be able to override the system if I could just get to the server room.
What's going on?
Nothing to worry about, everything's fine. Get down behind the desk, now, both of you.
I will be rambling on at this point, but no words can truly describe how fucking amazing the combat is in this game. There are very few shooters that come close to how finely tuned the combat is in Max Payne 3. In the context of realistic physics and movement anyways, every animation is painful for Max. He's not as agile as he used to be, and yet he still dives and dodges bullets like raindrops. Max's broken state plays a factor as well. You know that he shouldn't even be able to do a lot of this given how many times he's been shot. This kind of makes him, in a sense, a force of nature. The kind of nature that can't tell apart the past or the future. People are shooting at Max, he shoots back and is still breathing somehow. That's who he is in the face of combat. And all of this is to unravel the plot that has been there before Max had ever even arrived. The wife of the family eventually gets kidnapped and the rabbit hole only gets deeper. And Max, throughout this game, continues to lose his grip, as evidenced by the disorienting cutscenes and the emphasis on specific words or phrases. The way it tells its story is very different from the previous titles where you had the comic book style panels, and I actually quite liked them at the time, but the bigger budget for this game allowed for the in-game cutscenes to come to life, the voice actor to be given literally a face and a voice in the game itself, as well as other characters animating and interacting in the world. If you've played the previous Max Payne games, then fundamentally speaking, the loop is the same. Bad guys appear, you shoot your way out, rinse and repeat until the level is finished. The game has several chapters that have a number of different cutscenes and events that unfold, and that let you see different parts of Brazil. And for those that missed the cold, well, you get to experience that again in Chapter 4.
Trouble seems to find us, Max.
Sure, trouble finds us the same way you found me, slumped in a bar, drunk on self-pity. I'd been sitting at the bar for 3 hours, or about 5 years, depending on how you looked at things. I tried not to look at things. I tried not to think about when it was that my existence became less about the things that make up people's lives, and more about the holes that losing those things leave behind. But I wasn't doing a very good job at it. These pricks had been annoying me for days. They were typical Jersey rich kids. The ringleader, I think his name was Tony. His dad was some well-known hood, drug dealer, racketeer, pillar of the New Jersey community.
Line 'em up, line 'em up, line 'em up.
Let me ask you a question.
Let's go.
Where the fuck are your donuts?
This kid had a well-developed sense of humor for New Jersey.
Back in New York, in New Jersey, a positive community of people that come to visit Max and see how he's doing. Of course though, whenever there's a misunderstanding or misadventure, a gun gets involved and well, Max had good intentions protecting a woman, but at the expense of his own living arrangements in New Jersey. The father of the son sends endless waves of Italians after you, being hunted. This leads to being the catalyst event for Max eventually leaving the country and going to Brazil, a place that also has guns and football. Now, the depiction of Brazil is generally contested in Max Payne 3. Visually, it's beautiful and looks authentic, where you have the sunshine glossing over the richer parts of the city and the colourful but unforgiving urban jungle of the favela. And as for the people, well, it's stereotyped here more or less. It may just be a perspective thing, but not every Brazilian is bad or unlikable, which unfortunately seems to be the case in this game. From what I've heard, it's a very welcoming country towards foreigners, but it doesn't seem to be the case here for Max Payne 3. To them, he's just a drunk gringo that is putting his nose into things that shouldn't concern him. The plot evolves into a web of lies, misdirection, and misunderstanding of the events unfolded. Max eventually figures things out, but not after failure after failure. The game is transformative in both the climax of the character's journey, as well as the realization of the gameplay itself, where all of the fights are chaotic and wild and fun. It's one of those games that comes once in a while, showing you something both beautiful and ugly. There's beauty in the scenery, the human to a fault side of Max, and that there's still good in him, knowing the right thing to do even with all the circumstances surrounding his life and the situation. The music as well, done by Health, one of my favorite bands that assists in telling the story of the game through their soundtrack. If you listen to some of the tracks along with the cutscenes, as well as paying attention to the track Tears, you can gauge the final direction of the game's story. Max Payne 3 is one of the best games I've ever played. For all its polarities between it and its predecessors, it ultimately brings forth a satisfying conclusion to Max's story, with some of the best soundtracks ever written, the most satisfying gunplay in a third-person shooter ever in my opinion, James McCaffrey once again breathing life into Max with the same level of cynicism and humour intact from the previous titles, being our hands, feet, eyes and ears into a new world with the same life lessons, the same tragedies and the same mistakes being repeated again. I feel like this may be the last linear title Rockstar ever makes. I hope I'm wrong though. But with the direction that they've been going with GTA 5 for the past 10 years, as well as Red Dead 2 back in 2018 and ongoing, it seems that a large and rich open world setting seems to be what they're aiming for now with future titles. And like GTA 5, 6 will be huge. Max Payne 3 and many other linear titles have shown time and time again that sometimes the best way is the way forward and not just the road with many forks. It still has some of the noir beats, especially in the New Jersey levels. We've gotten some slow-mo based shooters since, but Max Payne 3 truly holds its own and in my opinion is the best game of the trilogy. From what I know, Remedy are actually remaking the first two games, and while I'm excited for it, I'm happy to let Max live peacefully with 3. I'm okay with there not being another sequel ever again. Sometimes you've just got to put the gun down and walk into the sunset. The game, Max Payne 3, is about Max moving on finally, seeing sunshine for the first time in a long time, not having to worry about saving another person anymore, but only saving the last person left, himself. Thank you for watching.
There it was, the soundtrack to my life. And, for a few seconds, came harmony. Finally.